This is the story of a revoked commercial clearance, a halted delivery fleet at the Buckingham Palace tradesman's gate, and the exact moment Queen Camilla realised the ultimate financial endorsement of the crown cannot be handed out as a family favour. In less than 24 hours, the carefully constructed illusion of her absolute authority over the royal brand was quietly and ruthlessly dismantled at a security checkpoint. What Queen Camilla just realised behind closed doors is that while a title might grant you a grand residence and the deference of the cameras, true institutional power is forged in strict corporate governance, unbroken bloodlines, and the silent, unyielding control of the monarchy's commercial architecture. Over the next few minutes, we are going to unpack the highly opportunistic, financially aggressive power grab she recently attempted during a period of acute vulnerability for the institution. We will expose how a clandestine attempt to permanently stamp the ultimate royal seal of approval onto the private businesses of her non-royal family inadvertently triggered a freezing institutional retaliation engineered by Prince William. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand the terrifying realization currently paralyzing the Queen, despite sitting on the highest throne in the land. She commands absolutely no true authority over the dynasty's billion-dollar commercial legacy. To understand why this specific internal clash reached a boiling point at the palace gates, we must first step back and recognize the staggering 30-year manipulation that brought Camilla to this pinnacle of the British social hierarchy. For 3 decades, she played the longest, most meticulous game of reputational rehabilitation in modern history. She survived the bitter public fallout of the 1990s, systematically worked to soften the global memory of her role in Princess Diana's tragedy, and patiently replaced the old institutional guards with her own staunch loyalists. Camilla knew that to survive within the firm, she had to project an aura of quiet, uncomplaining aristocratic duty, while ruthlessly securing the levers of internal influence. When she was officially crowned queen, dropping the restrictive consort caveat entirely, she believed she had finally won the absolute right to dictate not just the visual identity, but the commercial weight of the modern monarchy. She operated under the fundamental belief that because she held the unwavering devotion of King Charles, she held the keys to the entire institution's economic influence. She felt entirely untouchable, assuming that the sprawling palace bureaucracy, from the private secretaries to the logistics directors, would always bend to her personal public relations and financial agenda. But the fatal flaw in Camilla's architecture of power is that it is built entirely on the fragile authority of a temporary reign. It completely ignores the sovereign autonomy and the fierce protective instincts of the Prince of Wales. That dangerous illusion of absolute power became a battlefield just days ago, triggered by an overwhelming sense of opportunistic ambition and a profound commercial desperation. To understand the weapon she tried to wield, you must understand the Royal Warrant. The Royal Warrant of Appointment is not a simple certificate. It is the ultimate, undeniable forensic evidence of royal endorsement. When a company is granted the right to display the royal arms alongside the words "by appointment to His Majesty," their commercial value skyrockets globally. It is the golden ticket of the British aristocracy, historically reserved for tradesmen and corporations that have supplied the highest quality of service to the sovereign bloodline for years. Paralysed by a growing fear that her own family's public relevance and financial leverage would inevitably fade once the crown shifts to the next generation, Camilla's team attempted to execute an act of staggering commercial exploitation. Behind the scenes, her private office drafted a highly sophisticated secret mandate aimed directly at the Royal Household Tradesmen's Committee. According to internal palace leaks, Camilla was quietly pushing to bypass the grueling, multi-year vetting process to grant highly lucrative royal warrants to a curated list of businesses directly linked to the Parker Bowles lineage and her closest aristocratic allies. This included luxury food purveyors associated with her son, high-end interior design firms run by her inner circle, and private logistics companies managed by her loyalists. It was a calculated attempt to siphon the immense prestige and global goodwill of the monarchy to artificially inflate the corporate value of her non-royal family. Camilla wanted to use the glittering prestige of the crown to build a permanent, independent commercial empire for her bloodline before the political winds of the monarchy could shift. She assumed she could quietly push these corporate updates through the palace bureaucracy, firmly believing that no administrative official would dare question the logistical demands of the king's wife. She believed the household staff would comply in silence and that Prince William would simply absorb the encroachment to avoid a public scene. She severely underestimated the cold forensic vigilance of Prince William and the absolute, unyielding protective rage he harbours for the integrity of the sovereign brand. The Prince of Wales does not rely on drawing room gossip to protect his inheritance. His team relies on the meticulous monitoring of royal logistics, corporate registries, and internal financial communications. The discovery of this secret corporate coup did not happen through an explosive family confrontation. It happened through a routine digital audit of the joint household commercial servers, coordinated by the Duchy of Cornwall's Financial Oversight Board. When William's fiercely loyal Chief of Staff intercepted the fast-tracked Royal Warrant applications and the altered vendor manifests, the reality was immediate and chilling. William recognized this not as a harmless desire to support family businesses, but as a parasitic encroachment upon the sovereign brand. While the true royals dedicate their lives to public service, Camilla was weaponizing the bureaucratic system to distribute the ultimate symbols of royal legitimacy to individuals who carry no royal blood, turning the crown into a commercial printing press for her friends. For William, this crossed an invisible, unforgivable line. The response from the future king was executed with a cold, ruthless legality that used the very weight of institutional corporate protocol as a weapon. Prince William did not engage in a messy, undignified shouting match with his stepmother, nor did he allow his press team to leak angry statements to the tabloids. He used the system to execute a silent, devastating counterstrike, operating with unprecedented administrative authority as the heir apparent and the absolute controller of the dynasty's financial architecture. William quietly activated a strict binding protocol update regarding all commercial endorsements. Internally, this maneuver is now quietly referred to as the Commercial Audit Protocol. Without a single word spoken in anger, William legally and entirely overhauled the royal warrant granting process. He dictated that absolutely no new warrants or vendor clearances could be issued without a unanimous vote from a newly formed joint committee, a committee that now explicitly requires the direct physical signature of the Prince of Wales to authorise any commercial association. He effectively stripped Camilla's office of all independent administrative oversight regarding palace suppliers, turning the royal brand into an impenetrable fortress. The execution of this silent retaliation was breathtaking in its subtlety, resulting in an absolute visual and psychological humiliation for the Queen. On the morning, the first wave of Camilla's newly favoured suppliers arrived at the heavily guarded tradesmen's entrance of Buckingham Palace. Expecting to make their inaugural prestigious deliveries as officially mandated royal vendors, they did not find a welcoming committee. Instead, as the fleet of delivery vehicles approached the secure perimeter, they hit an invisible, impenetrable wall of corporate protocol. When the drivers presented their newly issued commercial clearances to the security personnel, the system did not grant them entry, the heavy steel barriers did not lower. The Royal Guards, operating under direct binding orders from Prince William's administrative office, politely but firmly informed the contractors that their commercial clearance had been flagged and permanently revoked under the new sovereign audit guidelines. They were denied entry. Their digital credentials had been wiped from the palace mainframe. Furthermore, the lead drivers were handed a perfectly polite, heavily formalised document from William's estate, clearly stating that their companies did not meet the stringent historical requirements for royal supply, and any future attempts to bypass the standard vetting channels would result in a permanent commercial blacklist. Simultaneously, a copy of this notice of commercial severance was delivered directly to Camilla's private office inside the palace. What looked like a routine security and vendor update was actually a total dismantling of Camilla's shadow commercial empire. By overriding her arrangements in front of the palace staff and completely turning her family's corporate partners away at the gates, Prince William exposed the ultimate truth of the modern monarchy. Camilla may wear the crown and live in the palace, but William protects the brand. He audits the books and he absolutely controls the gates. As the reality of the halted delivery trucks and the revoked commercial clearances was relayed back to her private quarters, Camilla experienced a wave of cold, suffocating panic. She realized that her administrative trick had not only failed, but it had permanently exposed her total lack of financial hard power. Stripped of her illusion of supreme control, administratively walled off by her stepson, and publicly disciplined without a single word being spoken, she knew the trap had snapped shut. Terrified by the sudden freezing reality that her influence ends where William's corporate authority begins, Camilla retreated to the one remaining card she had left to play. She went directly to King Charles. She presented the revoked vendor logs, the humiliating notice of commercial severance, and the rejected royal warrant applications. She demanded that the king use his supreme sovereign power to crush William's administrative blockade. She demanded that he force the Prince of Wales to lift the commercial ban, approve her family's businesses, and aggressively enforce her absolute authority as queen over the royal economy. The entire future of the internal royal hierarchy hung in the heavy, suffocating silence of the king's study as the queen stood waiting for her husband to deliver her salvation. When Queen Camilla stood in the quiet sanctuary of the king's study, demanding that Charles use the absolute power of the sovereign to crush William's administrative blockade and tear up the notice of commercial severance, she expected immediate explosive compliance. For 30 years, Charles had been her ultimate shield. He had fought his mother, his political advisors, the British press, and his own children to force Camilla's acceptance into the royal fold. He had spent decades burning through his own political capital to protect her from the consequences of their shared history. Camilla fully expected that in this moment of acute financial humiliation, Charles would summon Prince William and deliver a crushing reprimand. She expected the king to remind his heir that Camilla was the queen, and that her family must be granted the ultimate commercial endorsement to preserve the unity of the crown. But she encountered something far more terrifying than anger. She encountered a devastating silence. What appears to be true, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics of the king's household, is that Charles simply refused to intervene. He did not yell. He did not defend his wife's aggressive attempt to hijack the royal warrant system. He looked at the revoked vendor logs. He read the legally binding documents issued by his son's corporate office. He sat in the suffocating quiet of his study, and he did absolutely nothing. This was the psychological climax of Camilla's decades-long campaign for total institutional supremacy, and it ended not with a grand declaration, but with a freezing realization. Charles is no longer the rebel Prince of Wales fighting for his mistreated lover. He is the king, and as the monarch facing his own profound vulnerabilities and the fragile state of his reign, his primary overriding duty is the preservation of the crown's financial and historical integrity. Charles knows with forensic clarity that the royal warrant is not a family piggy bank. It is the absolute foundation of the monarchy's commercial mystique. To attempt to use his emotional weight to override a strict corporate audit, simply to appease his wife's financial ambitions and elevate her non-royal relatives, would be an act of institutional suicide. To publicly or privately dismantle William's invocation of the commercial audit protocol would signal a chaotic, degraded monarchy that allows the king's wife to cannibalize the sacred economic traditions of the state for private gain. In that singular moment of silence, Charles chose the legal and commercial survival of the institution over the financial vanity of his wife. Camilla learned the hardest lesson of her royal life. The king will no longer save her from the chief executive of the bloodline. To understand why this commercial lockout is so permanently catastrophic for Camilla, we must examine the staggering reality hiding behind her royal title. The public sees a queen riding in gilded carriages, hosting state banquets, and wearing the historic jewels of the realm. They assume that the title comes with an impenetrable fortress of wealth and independent economic power. But behind closed doors, the forensic financial architecture of the firm tells a remarkably different story. Camilla owns virtually nothing of the royal estate. Her secret maneuvering with the royal warrants was never just about wanting to give her son's friends a marketing boost. It was a frantic, calculated attempt to secure a permanent organizational foothold and independent financial legitimacy before her ultimate protector is gone. She knows that without King Charles, she instantly becomes a dowager queen with zero biological connection to the new monarch, completely dependent on the very stepson whose corporate vault she just tried to bypass. Prince William is not just the heir to the throne, he is the billionaire landlord. He owns the Duchy of Cornwall, the staggering real estate and commercial empire that funds the monarchy's private endeavours. He commands the vast agricultural lands, the commercial properties, and the financial portfolios that generate the family's true power. Camilla possesses no independent constitutional funding and no vast ancestral corporations of her own to fall back on. She cannot grant her family sweeping commercial powers because she does not hold the keys to the kingdom's treasury. By activating the Audit Protocol, William legally, quietly, and permanently locked her out of his corporate empire, reminding her that her power is entirely theoretical, while his is deeply financially structural. The realization that her entire public relations apparatus is now effectively boxed in by her stepson's administrative goodwill is a psychological prison of her own making. The illusion of absolute operational control was instantly replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of her dependency. As Camilla's shadow commercial empire was quietly dismantled at the delivery gates of Buckingham Palace, the visual landscape of the monarchy began to immediately reflect the new order. This is where the silent execution of revenge translates into undeniable public reality. In the days following this internal crisis, viewers and royal analysts noticed a profound, subtle shift in how protocol is being weaponized. The Princess of Wales emerged as a portrait of freezing, aristocratic restraint, without ever having to issue a single public statement defending the royal brand. Catherine did not need to negotiate for respect or demand that her own family be given lucrative royal contracts. She simply allowed the massive quiet weight of her husband's absolute authority to protect the institution. The visual shifts are becoming visible to anyone who knows how to read the subtle language of the palace. Shortly after the commercial audit protocol was finalized, Kensington Palace hosted a major reception for early childhood development partners. To the untrained eye, it was standard royal duty, but to those watching the internal power dynamics, the visual cues were devastating. The corporate partners and philanthropic vendors selected for the event were vetted exclusively through a newly secured independent syndicate managed directly by William's financial directors, bypassing the Central Royal Logistics Office entirely. Every detail from the catering to the event design was executed by legacy suppliers directly loyal to the Prince and Princess of Wales. This was not a petty aesthetic choice. In the highest echelons of the British royal family, administrative autonomy is the forensic evidence of shifting power. By operating flawlessly through his own secure commercial channels, William was actively executing the institutional restoration of the true bloodline while signaling the permanent financial boundary placed upon Camilla. He demonstrated that uncomplaining sacrifice, fierce protection of the heritage, and steadfast loyalty to the crown will always outmaneuver the unchecked financial ambition of outsiders. He does not need to fight Camilla for dominance because he has already engineered the ultimate checkmate. The true royals remain on the inside, protecting the integrity of the brand, and the opportunistic liabilities are managed with flashing red lights and revoked commercial clearances. This brings us to the deeper, tragic meaning of this entire crisis. Camilla spent 30 years carefully clawing her way to the very top of the British social hierarchy. She endured intense public hatred, she orchestrated a masterful public relations rehabilitation, and she successfully convinced Charles to place the highest crown in the land upon her head. She believed that reaching the summit meant she would finally be safe, that she could secure her family's economic future and rewrite the financial history of the dynasty in her own image. But what this story of the Royal Warrant purge undeniably proves is that the crown on Camilla's head is entirely hollow. She is surrounded by the trappings of unimaginable wealth, yet she is paralyzed by the operational reality that she is merely a temporary figure in William's empire. She played a 30-year game of chess, sacrificing everything for the ultimate title, only to realize too late that she cannot control the capital on the board. Camilla is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, sitting next to a king who will no longer defend her bureaucratic schemes. Walled off from the royal billions and forced to live under the absolute unyielding corporate authority of the next generation. The era of the Shadow Queen, attempting to restructure the commercial foundations of the monarchy, is effectively over. If you want to continue unpacking the silent warfare, the hidden administrative maneuvers, and the psychological power dynamics of the modern British monarchy, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We will continue to pull back the curtain on the illusions of power, one subtle detail at a time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next analysis.